Let's put the microphone in the right place. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to a live stream with me, Richard Vobe. So kind of you to come along and join me this afternoon at 4 o'clock or after the event, as many people of you do. And actually, I was just looking at the figures there, and it's reassuring to know that we get over 300 people who enjoy these live readings, mostly after the event, and that's perfectly fine. And I appreciate you coming along and watching. And if you do enjoy it, do leave me a comment, because it would be interesting. If you have a suggestion for a book to read next, a classic book, preferably one that's out of print, and that's not going to cause too much hassle for me reading it, then that would be great. Hello to the lovely Julia, to Jeff Kellison, who says he's broken down with a flat tyre. Jeff, I hope you're all right. You must be working off some bad karma. Oh, a man like you don't have bad karma. Hello from a changeable Shire, says Adrian, Turbo Stream. Laura says good morning to Julia, and you must be feeling deflated. Do you know, I have a slight feeling of deflation at the moment. Been trying to sort some bits and pieces out, and just feel a bit, some days when you just feel a bit flat yourself, just feel a bit flat. But I've got to psych myself up because we've got the Vobe Show this evening on the Vobe Show channel. However, we are reading I Saw Two Englands by H.V. Morton, and we are very close to the end. We're on chapter 9, and I think we could get this wrapped up by Monday or Tuesday. Next book should be War and Peace, should keep you off the streets. Yes, I should think it bloody would. War and Peace. I was thinking of doing a slightly longer volume, actually. These thin little pamphlets like War and Peace, just very very short-lived, aren't they? Probably 2 or 3 years to get through that one. Excuse me. Right, let's crack on. He was looking at AA gun shells for the anti-aircraft guns, so he's now got something else in mind. I expressed a wish to see some captured German submarine officers, as you do. I wanted to find out how we are treating them and what kind of men they are, and what do they do with themselves, and if they are grateful to us for having literally fished them out of the jaws of death. Well, we tried bombing them, and then we pulled out the survivors. I guess that's one way of putting it. The officer commanding the district gave me an introduction to the commandant of the prison camp, and I set off to motor 50 miles into a wilderness, a beautiful wilderness, whose solitude deepened as I went on. The German prisoners captured during the first 10 weeks of war didn't include one army officer, NCO, or private. They were all either U-boat officers and men rescued at sea, or crews of raiding aircraft shot down over our coasts and in our territorial waters. Oh, interesting. Men are sent to one camp, officers to others. As in the last war, large country houses have been taken over to accommodate the officers, and the first one to be occupied, the Donington Hall of this wall, was the place to which I was journeying. I cannot tell you its name, but it is known to all the villagers around here as the U-boat Hotel. It is the heart of a district familiar to the more adventurous kind of hiker and cyclist, and I went for many a mile without meeting a soul. It was a land of stone walls and streams. Ahead of me I saw hills dusted with the first year's snow. I felt that I must be getting near my destination at last, and this became a certainty, as turning the corner of a lane, I was obliged to pull aside in order to make way for a remarkable procession led by a mounted policeman. He rode in this remote solitude as if he were patrolling Whitehall. Behind him marched several old soldiers wearing the ribbons of the last war, rifles and fixed bayonets at the slope. Marching four abreast came about 20 young men, laughing and joking in German as they strode between a line of guards. Most of them were bareheaded, and all wore strangely assorted clothing. I was to learn that some of it belonged to British naval officers who had rescued them from the sea. Many wore the leather trousers which German submarine officers wear on duty, and these garments had been supplemented by civilian coats and waistcoats. The procession ended with more armed guards and a British officer. In the orderly room, to which I was conducted by a sentry, the colonel in command of the U-boat hotel was telephoning to a dentist in a distant town, arranging for the teeth of 6 Germans to be stopped. Just stop those teeth, will you? How many have you got? 9. I couldn't resist that little joke. If I'm allowed to have heard the conversation, I said, might I say that 6 seems a high proportion to require dental treatment? Many of the U-boats were in a position 2 months before the war broke out, replied the colonel. I suppose even a U-boat officer puts off going to the dentist as long as possible. Anyhow, the fact remains that their teeth are in a bad way. I shall send them to the dentist with an armed guard in a motor lorry. The colonel had been through the last war and was on the reserve list when call-up came to organise the U-boat hotel. He is the ideal man for the job, a bachelor who lives living in the depths of the country, a humorous, humane disciplinarian who is resolved to make his captives as comfortable as regulations allow. He has, under him, 5 officers and 150 men of the National Defence Corps, all old soldiers. Several of them were, by some ironic twist of destiny, once prisoners of war in Germany. The officers and guards live in the estate cottages, the barns and the stables, while the Germans live in more spectacular surroundings of the hall itself. Before we went to the hall, we had a look at the quarters in which the guards were living. A canteen is being fitted up in the old coach house. Coke stoves are being installed in barns and stables where the men sleep. The old soldiers appeared delighted to be back in khaki. I thought that perhaps their wives would not be too pleased to see how gaily they have taken to the old life. As we walked past their beds and looked at their kits neatly set out on the blankets, I noticed that above every bed had been placed a picture of the king or the queen. A veteran was sitting near the stove, solemnly adding to the art gallery. He had a pile of old sketches and tattlers, and a pair of scissors. I watched him at work, gloomily passing over the film stars and dancers, but whenever he came across a picture of the king or the queen, he began to pause with sombre satisfaction, and dug the scissors into the page. It will be a loyal and regal barn when he has finished with it. We now approached the hall itself, a huge and gloomy Edwardian country house in a style that might be termed ship owner's Tudor. It was empty when war broke out and had been unoccupied, I think, for 2 or 3 years. It's the kind of house in which few people, except orphans, committees and lunatics, can afford to live these days. It has now been surrounded by a double system of barbed wire entanglements. Armed guards patrol the place day and night and are assisted in their vigilance by high lookout platforms all round the barbed wire. A circle of powerful electric lights illuminated the hall and its grounds after nightfall, causing it to be the only unblacked-out place in England. The Germans sleep in dormitories, formerly the best bedrooms, and as more prisoners arrive, more rooms are opened up. They sleep on comfortable iron bedsteads and box mattresses and have an adequate supply of warm blankets. Men who are rescued from the sea rarely have any possessions. Therefore, the officers will have to be provided with razors, soap, shaving brushes, and other articles, which are to be seen neatly arranged above each bed. Their possessions will grow, no doubt, as their captivity lengthens and as parcels are received from Germany. At the moment, they have no money, but arrangements for an Anglo-German prisoners of war finance scheme is going through with the help of the Dutch government, which is acting as a go-between. When this scheme is complete, money will go to Germany from our prisoners. When this scheme is complete, money will go to Germany for our prisoners, and money will come over here for Germans. Lack of money, of course, means no cigarettes, but the British officers have supplied cigarettes at their own expense. The huge panelling dining room on the ground floor, in which the ship owner once entertained his guests, is the German common room. It is furnished simply with a few chairs and a ping-pong table. The only decoration is a photograph of Hitler shooting out his arm in salute. "Every prisoner is 100% Nazi," said the colonel. "At first, when they are addressed by an officer, they would come to the attention and give the Nazi salute with a Heil Hitler. But we've stopped all that, and they don't attempt to do it now." "What do they do all day?" "They play cards and ping-pong. A local bishop has sent us a lot of German books. I hope, as time goes on, to be able to organise some other amusements for them, so that they won't get too bored." A serving hatch from the dining hall communicates with a large modern kitchen. 4 German naval ratings who had been submarine cooks have been detailed to look after their officers. They receive ordinary military rations, exactly the same foods as that in the British officers' mess, and this the German cooks are allowed to prepare as they like, or rather, as their officers like. While we were looking at the bathrooms upstairs, we heard the tramp of approaching feet and saw the Germans returning from their morning exercise. The sentries sloped arms. The gates in the barbed wire were hastily unlocked, and the young men passed inside. "See that young fellow, third from the right, third in the last file," said the commandant. "He's a submarine lieutenant, a mere boy, and he sobbed his heart out the first night because he is now no further use to the fatherland." We went downstairs to the dining room where the Germans were now gathered. They sprang to attention until the commandant told them to relax. A sentry stood at the door with rifle and fixed bayonet. The young men gathered round the commandant and talked freely to him in excellent English, and I could see that they liked him. I think these young fellows also respected the long row of ribbons on his chest. It was surprising to realise that such an average-looking young fellows, just the kind of young men one might have met at an Anglo-German party in London before the war, were the men who have launched torpedoes against our ships and have attempted to make a mess of the Forth Bridge. But the enemy, when he is not actually trying to kill you, is always a surprising sight. I've known a number of Nazis, and they've been impressed and irritated. I have known a number of Nazis and have been impressed and irritated by them on many occasions, and I have always found that on the essential doctrines of their faith it is impossible to argue. For a non-Nazi to talk politics to a Nazi provokes precisely the same kind of mental deadlock as between an atheist and a Catholic. I had no need to look twice at the German officers to see that they carry their faith into captivity. They had been fished out of the sea or picked up from the land, positively bursting with love and homage for their almost divine leader. And nothing could convince them that Germany would fail to win the war. Gosh. Just say hello to a few other people who have just popped on. Ed Loud, on my way through miles of woodland, green space, planning socially distanced walk with friends. listening to the Vobes to get any better. How can my day get any better? Or can it get drearily? What dreary? Dreamy. Oh, dreamy. Oh, I've got you. Graham Roffey says, good afternoon. Sorry, late. On parade again. Bit of a flap at the office. Excuse me. Bit of a frog in the throat. Donington Hall, says Linda Kane, hello Linda, was considered to be easy living and a bit lax. For officers only, the airman Gunther Puschau became the only German to escape Britain. I think I've got a book. It's either about him. It's about a German who escaped. Maybe it was him. Managed to listen, and there's a film, isn't there? There's a film of the same story. Managed to listen live at last, says Lee Lawson. Hello, Richard and Linda. Hello, Lee. Nice of you to drop by. Michael, did 2 airmen from Hello Hello make it back to England? Not sure about that. Anyway. Had they not been prisoners, I should have asked them some leading questions and would have drawn them into argument. Instead, I asked them only the usual things about the food and beds. They were all anxious to receive letters and parcels from home. They also wanted money so that they could buy comforts. One asked eagerly if, when their money arrives, they would be allowed to get in stock some wine for Christmas. One young fellow, the commander of a submarine, has become a father since the war started. He was out on his station weeks before the declaration of war, ready to attack merchant ships. Of course, he received no news of his wife, and he worried all the time, wondering whether it was a boy or a girl. Then, one day, a depth charge sent his ship spinning down into death. In the hideous chaos of machinery and pitch blackness, for the emergency lighting went out, he heard the hiss of the entering sea and thought that now he would never know if it was a girl or a boy. But he was in the sea, and he was picked up, and he was soon found inside the lonely hall, and still he did not know. He spoke to his wife, but no letter came in reply. He wrote to his wife. Then one day the door opened, and in walked a German submarine officer who had been picked up a few days before in the ocean, and he was able to put his mind at rest. I saw your wife at Wilhelmshaven, he said, and I can tell you it is a boy. Jawohl, mein Herr Kapitän. Oh, thank you, Hans. That is very kind of you. It is nice to know that the line will carry on and there will be more U-boat men. Yes, indeed. By the time he grows up, we will have escaped. Oh, Lord. As long as that, yes. Oh, we better start digging now. Anyway, probably culturally inappropriate for me to do that these days, but I think you'll find that was just a little bit of pitch shifting and not actually an imitation of an accent, just so you know. After lunching with the British officers in the mess, I say, old chap, I noticed with interest that they were all reading The Escaping Club by A.J. Evans, an admirable account of British prisoners in Germany during the First World War. I was told that the commandant had suggested that it was their duty to study the psychology of war captivity. Good idea. It's impossible for men captured in war not to dream of escape, I was told. No matter how awful the horrors from which they have escaped, and how sure the knowledge that they are safe, the boredom, the lack of news, the very fact that they are held against their wills in enemy country, makes any risk and even a return to danger seem worthwhile. And here is an instructive story which some of our war sentimentalists might take to heart. A compassionate lady who lives in the neighbourhood who wrote recently to the commandant saying that she would like to lighten the captivity of the German officers by providing them with books and cigarettes. She ended by saying that she felt that she should be told that they should be told that the British people had no quarrel with the German people, but only with their form of government. Permission was obtained for this letter to be read to the prisoners. They listened appreciatively to it and murmured their gratitude. But when the interpreter came to the last sentence, there was a burst of laughter, and one officer, speaking for the rest, said, "We do not wish to accept any favours from people who hold such foolish ideas." They spoke the true Nazi. "Yet," said one of the camp officers, "politicians have a nerve to talk about having no quarrel with the German people. What are these soldiers but the German people in uniform? What strikes us all about these young Germans is their astonishing bumptiousness. They are the most arrogant fellows you can imagine. They clearly regard us definitely as an inferior race. Some of them believe that England has already been invaded and it's only a matter of weeks or days before German army comes along and rescues them. I heard one airman who, when he was captured, kept on asking the most insolent way to be directed to the nearest port of the German army. Another one I've also heard was decently treated by a family on the coast when he came ashore in a rubber boat. As the military were taking him away, he turned to and asked the civilians for their names and addresses, adding, "I will be able to do you a good turn when we invade your country. You'll see, we will be back." I asked him if the prisoners knew where they are. No, they haven't the slightest idea. They think they're in Scotland. "Yes, we are in Scotland. That is where we are. This tiny island at the southern part of England, separated by the Solent, I believe, is Scotland." "Ja, well, mein Herr Kapitän. It is most definitely Scotland. I have walked the 20 miles from east to west, and it is definitely Scotland. The Isle of Scotland. That is what they are saying. And at Ventnor, we can get some coloured sand. The sand of Scotland. We will all be wearing kilts. It would be very nice." Are we still broadcasting? Have I been shut down? Maybe I have been shut down. Anyway. My next call was at the famous Naval shipyard, where more than 17,000 men are now employed. The air was hideous with the sound of hammering and the ear-splitting machine gun spurts of rivets. I looked down on a stark forest of poles set in the brown mud of a river estuary. Each cluster of poles was the nest of a ship. In some, the ship was visible as a rusty hulk. In others, she was almost ready for her guns. In still more, she was an embryo of bolted keel plates on which men stamped about with hob-nailed boots. The seagulls called mournfully as they flew in white flocks, driven inland by storms at sea. They perched peakily on the tops of the poles, as if anxious to see how the ships were getting on. They alighted on their keels of unborn warships and stood in white rows on the piles of armour plate. The works manager pointed towards the dark etching of the masts. "I've got one here," he says, "and two there, and one in that shed, and in the second shed, 3. And over yonder, you can see from here, I've got another one. And near that bunch of tower cranes, I've got 4, and I'm ready for the 5th. He was like a backyard poultry fancier counting his chickens, but his chickens were cruisers, destroyers, aircraft carriers, and submarines, the ships of the unborn fleet. "What a programme," I said in astonishment. "Yes, but it's nothing really," he replied. "Think of all the other shipyards in every one of them as busy as this. Looks to me as if the Admiralty is not preparing for 3 years' war, but 23 years' war. Honestly, it does. Look here." And he proceeded to tell me a few things about Navy rearmament. As we walked round the slipways, we saw destroyers, submarines, and aircraft carriers. We also saw something which would be deleted by the censor, so there's no point mentioning it. In a dock, we saw merchant cruisers being lifted out with guns in order that they may attack U-boat pirates. And I might tell you that this is not as simple as it sounds, for the task of turning a peaceful ship into a merchant cruiser is complicated and full of snags. I love that word, snags. I saw one vessel with her whole stern cut open to the waterline. Men swarmed about her, gathering her to stand the strain of guns. I'd always believed that a warship was known by a number until she was christened by the Lords of the Admiralty, or whoever it is who helps find the splendid and romantic names for warships. But this is not so. All the workers from this shipyard called the new fleet by name. They would point up to a blown cliff of armour plate and say, they would point up to a brown cliff of armour plate and say, "That's the Illustrious. She'll soon be away." And indicating a mass of rusty plates, hardly waist high, "There's Industrious, only laid down last week." There is nothing more hush-hush in Britain today than such nurseries of the Navy. No one is encouraged to talk about what goes on in there. In theory, the workmen are supposed to forget what they've been doing all day as they pass out of the gates, and when the time comes, the great ships go their way in secrecy. A bottle of champagne is no longer cracked against her prows. No distinguished person presides over their going. Like grey ghosts, they slip out onto a full tide to join their companions at sea. We entered miles of darkened sheds in which, because of the blackout roofs, men work by electric light as if they were on a night shift. It was strange to see the battleships It was strange to see that battleships are cut out as women cuts out a blouse to a paper pattern. Prints come down from the draftsman, and the armour plate is cut to pattern as if it was satin. Someone comes along with a piece of chalk or a paintbrush and numbers them, and off they go, great chunks of hardened steel bordered with rivet holes, to be dumped near the appropriate slipway. While men are building the keel and bolting the hull, other men in the neighbouring shops are busy with gigantic turbines and gun turrets. The heavy shop in a battleship factory is about the most impressive thing you can see in a modern industry. You can imagine what several quadruple 14-inch mountings look like in the course of... Oh, can you imagine... Sorry, I'm having one of those days where I can't read again. I apologise. Can you imagine what several quadruple 14-inch mountings look like in the course of construction? They are vast enough when you see them on the ship and stand beneath the muzzle of the four greatest guns, but in the shop where they're made, they look preposterous. You wonder how on earth they ever got in, and still more, how on earth they'll ever get out. Lying 60 feet deep in earth, the gun turrets are made by men who descend into them as if into a bridge caisson. You look over the edge and see them working by electric light at the bottom of the pit. The steel castles also loom up into the roof. Men swarm up ladders to work on them. It's all a bit dull, all this industry, isn't it? It's all just a bit dull. I can see why people didn't rate the second half of this book, because although it is fairly interesting, it's also quite dull. But maybe, hello, Mr. Vobes. I think that's probably why everyone's chatting to themselves. Not that I needed a role in these days. There you go. The human condition is such all over the world, even today in many so-called civilized countries. People get to a stage where they believe their indoctrination and brainwashing unquestionably. That's true. Put a bagpiper into the courtyard to enhance the Scottishness. Oh yes, good idea. Ah, illustrious, a great name for a ship. I fondly recall the last illustrious mooring in Greenwich. I was sad to see her fangs removed, with her lacking her harriers. What are her fangs? But we need you if you weren't here keeping your beady eye on everyone. Oh, to the lovely Julia, yeah. Oh, sorry. Right. Feel very tired today. I don't understand why, because I had a reasonable sleep. I just, like some days when you're just not with it. And you're just sort of you're nodding off a bit. I'm awake, but there's nobody in there at the moment. But this is dull, isn't it? This is dull. Am I the only one who thinks this is dull? Who's this? Ernie. A while back, I hired HMS Belfast for my 40th and had a 1940s theme on it. It was the weekend of Remembrance Day. Oh, right. Cool. Her fangs were her planes. She was an aircraft carrier. They scrapped the planes. Oh, right. Oh, okay. Upon the armour plate of the gun mounting that will soon take place in the new battleship, some shipyard joker had written in chalk, "Run, Adolf, run." Upon another, someone else, not to be outdone, had written, "Arf a Mo, Hitler," and had supplemented it with a sketch of the Führer. That kind of humour is shattering. I wondered what the Germans would have made of it. Perhaps in some German factory at this moment unborn submarines may bear illuminating graffiti, but I think they would probably take a more violent form, something like the old "Gott strafe England." "Gott strafe England, we will strafe them until the end." One thing that is noticeable about the last war, and it is already evident in this, is that as a nation we see the funny side of our adversaries. The Kaiser and Little Willie were once popular, humorous characters, and so, by some strange twist of our character, are Adolf and his satellites. We entered a range of machine shops where the 3.7 mobile guns and also the fixed anti-aircraft guns were being made. The Navy likes the 4-inch AA gun because of its high ceiling, as they call its ability to rake the heavens. We then saw a terrible weapon, the multiple pom-pom, which is 8 guns in one. It pumps out death as a fire hose pumps water. Among the guns and the gun mountings, I came across an instrument so strange and sinister in appearance that I dropped my voice to a whisper and asked what it was. I told the works manager that if it were one of these things for sweeping up magnetic mines, or even something more secret, he could tell me in confidence and I would not mention it. "That," he said, "funny you should have spotted it. That's about the only leftover from peacetime in the whole shop. It's a machine gun. It's a machine for making Lux." He patted the Lux machine affectionately. Lux soap, I assume he means. "We'd rather make them than guns," he said. Yet when the shipyard was idle during the years of disarmament, half the shops in the town closed. Skilled men lived on the verge of starvation or migrated to starve somewhere else. Others cast aside the experience of years and rather than live on unemployment pay took all sorts of jobs. And now this war has opened all the shops again and has sent money coursing through the veins of the town. The only difficulty we have, said the works manager, is to get the right men back. We've dug them out from all kinds of places. See that man on the lathe? He's got shipbuilding blood in his veins, a wonderful workman. We found him working in a newsagent's shop. For another mile or so we trudged from shop to shop. It was as tiring as a conducted tour around the British Museum. At last we emerged again beside the river estuary, where skeleton masts rose out of the river mud. "That's one you haven't seen," said the works manager, pointing to a slipway. I could see only 5 or 6 men working in the mud, preparing the track for the keel plates, while others were strengthening the uprights. "But there's nothing there yet," I replied. The works manager pointed to a mound of rusty armour plate. "Oh, isn't there?" He smiled. "She'll be off in about 10 months." And she was still only a draftsman's dream, a mass of blueprints and a few thousand tons of unassembled steel. Already he saw her as a grey ship proudly carrying her guns and slipping off into the darkness of the seas. Such are the men who make the fleet behind the fleet. The ships which are growing up every day and night to take the place in that brave company whose task it has been for centuries to see that no enemy makes war on British soil. Just going to pause there because I'm struggling to read today, and everything's, sometimes, I don't know whether you get this, sometimes a sort of little white mist flows over you, or you just can't focus, or your body is just like wants to curl up and go to sleep. Well, that's how I am at the moment, and we're only 4:37. What are U-boats, says Jaden. They're submarines, German submarines are the U-boats. That they were in the Second World War. I don't know why they were called U-boats. Oops, sorry, Michael. German U-boats, yes, that's it. The Royal Navy had some great ships, such as HMS Irresistible, HMS Reindeer, and HMS Mullet. I can't believe they had an HMS Mullet. Julia, are you a DT teacher? What is a DT teacher? I'd like to know what that is. I heard and learned a bit about time back, but I forgot. Jaden says, hello, Richard. There we go. Marvellous. Oh, gosh. Like you want to just throw water over your face? Carry on Monday if you're struggling, says Turbo Stream. Underwater boats. Oh, underwater boats. Yes, U-boat for underwater boat. I hope you aren't coming down with me. No, I don't think I'm coming down with it. I just feel very flat, but also like I just want to curl up and go to sleep. But I can't do that because I've got the Vogue show tonight, and I've got to light the SE shortly. And workout video for tomorrow, and the list goes on, really. I just wish I was a bit more awake. And I wish I could focus. I've only got the one eye, so sometimes, the eye, if one eye is going, the other eye can't help it out, like in the old days. I turned homeward down the east coast and put into a port that was famous in peacetime for its North Sea trawler fleet. As I entered the town, a number of schoolgirls were standing before the contents bill of the evening newspaper, which read, "Air battle over East Coast town." "Oh, I wonder if it's ours," cried the girls, as if we were something to be proud of. "No, it ain't any of ours," said the news vendor, whereupon the girls pouted in disappointment. "It isn't ours," they cried. "He says it isn't ours. Come on, Mabel, don't waste a penny. It isn't ours." And they walked away. The blackout in this town was in total darkness, and when night fell I discerned a new alertness in the air, for the east coast feels very different from the west. Although the whole of England is on guard, the people on the east coast are acutely aware that they are, so to speak, in the firing line. They have seen battles in the air. The ports on the east coast are full of fishermen who have been machine-gunned at sea, and just across the way is Germany. The east coast feels that when the raids begin in earnest, they are the nearest and the most convenient target. The hotel near the docks in which I stayed was well provided with fire pumps, hand pumps, spades, buckets, sandbags, and incendiary bomb scoops. They were put out in the corridors by chambermaids as soon as the darkness fell. They had also systematized the shelter problem, as I read on my bedroom wall. In the event of an air raid warning, the occupant of room 61 should proceed to shelter number 1, situated in cellar across the road from the hotel. There is a strange flavour of the last war in many of these instructions. I detect the word proceed, the authorship of an old soldier. Troops in the last war never went anywhere, they always proceeded, and one, I expect, will be doing the same in this one. It's interesting because the police use that sort of very formal language. I was proceeding down Lombard Road when I came across a cook who was breaking into a vehicle. Not a car, a vehicle. I went to apprehend this individual, whereupon he punched me on the nose. It's very, very hurtful. I got down and cried into the gutter. Anyway, shortly before dawn, I went down to the harbour mouth to see the fishing fleet come in. While you and I are asleep in the darkened house, in our darkened houses, the fishermen of England are sweeping the blackout sea. Some of them hear the wind whistling at gale force over the chimneys and think of the men who pull up the trawler nets. What? Some of us hear the wind whistling at gale force over the chimneys and think of the men who pull up trawl nets, menaced by mine, submarine, and aircraft. Theirs is the truest form of courage. They go off into cold blood, into the war zone, and calmly earn their living as they used to in peacetime. Now and again we listen to the BBC Home Service. This is the BBC Home Service.
This is the BBC Home Service. London calling, London calling.
And we hear the neat voice of an announcer say that the Admiralty regrets to report the sinking of a trawler with the loss of 8 hands. Or we hear that a drifter struck a mine, or that an enemy plane appeared suddenly from the clouds and machine-gunned the crews of a fishing fleet. But the trawlers and the drifters still go over the top each time they put to sea, with no fuss and no drama and no medals at the end of it. If anything in this strange wartime world has been worn by sheer bravery, it is the fish that miraculously appear on the fishmonger's slab at a cost sometimes even lower than at peacetime. It is as if you and I had the courage to take our typewriters and our telephones into no man's land each night. It was not yet daylight as I stood at the harbour mouth, neither was it entirely dark. An icy wind blew in from the northeast. Water lapped the quaysides, and beyond the bar an angry sea rose and fell, and sometimes long walls of spray would be whipped slantwise over the breakwater. There was a small crowd waiting in the growing light, men with coat collars turned up, market officials, harbourmen, and perhaps relatives and friends of the crews. For ever going out and coming in is now an adventure, and landsmen wait eagerly for news of the returning fleet. So narrow is the entrance to the harbour that those standing on land can shout up to the crews as they steam past, "Here they come!" Looking seaward, I saw a line of trawlers in file, with smoke plumes at their chimney stacks, come rolling out of the grey sea. They'd been away, so a man shouted in my ear for 10... They had been away, so a man shouted in my ear, for 10 days, somewhere up north, and the wild weather had sustained them, and the seas had broken over them. As they passed one by one into calm water, I looked up and saw in each trawler a placid skipper, muffled to the eyes behind the glass of the wheelhouse, a pipe in his mouth and his hands on the wheel. "Seen anything, Bert?" a voice shouted as one went past. The skipper opened a window and removed his pipe for a moment. 7 miles, and not a rifle among us," was the reply. "Ask Andy what he saw." The next one came in. "Where's Andy, and what did he see?" "Andy? They tried to machine gun him." "Anybody hurt?" "No." One by one the grimy little heroes passed inside, the muffled crews of their sea boots clumping about the decks and hauling the ropes. Then a breath of excitement passes through the chilly band of watchers. "Here's old Andy." "Hi, Andy. What happened to you?" An angry face like a chunk of Aberdeen granite is thrust out of the wheelhouse. "Aye, nothing to report." "Didn't they machine gun you?" "You're very inquisitive, I'm thinking." And Andy indignantly removes his head. But as he goes, we notice that the dinghy has been drilled with a number of small holes. "Aye, I've been drilled. You're doomed, Captain Mannering. You're doomed." It is now daylight, and the trawlers nose their way back inside the quays. Because of the blackout, they can no longer unload the catch in the early hours of the morning, as they used to when the fish market was a blaze of light. Soon, however, baskets of fish and ice swing through the air. The gulls come screaming in white clouds. The floor is a perilous slide of ice and scales. No one refers to the war. After the first burst of interest as the ships came in, the subject is dropped, and no one thinks about anything but the number of fish caught and the price they will fetch at the auction. The merchants survey the few hundred yards of cod, codling, plaice, soles, skate, hake, and dogfish. "Aye, it's pathetic when you know that this market can look like in peacetime. It is pathetic when you know what this market can look like in peacetime," says one merchant. But it should be explained that if our fish supplies sometimes fall below normal, this may not be due to the fear of mines or U-boats, but the fact that nearly all the largest trawlers are now mine-sweeping, and many of the richest fishing grounds are closed off to the fishermen. Our skippers are utterly fearless. Indeed, unless the Navy keeps its eye on them, they will take most fantastic risks in order to come back with full holds. As time goes on and more fishing grounds are opened up by the Navy, and the fisherman who now lives in constricted world gets a little more space in which to cast his net. I approached a fisherman who was standing in a duffel coat and hob stockings, and I asked him what fishing was like in wartime. "I never think of it," he said. "If I'm to die out there," and he pointed to the sea, "well, I shall die out there. If I'm to die in my bed, I shall die there." In those words, he expressed the philosophy of his calling. "I don't say that some of the young lads get a bit windy," he said. "Sometimes it's like having a lot of girls aboard, seeing things that aren't there, imagining mines and submarines when there's nothing there at all. But they mostly get used to it and settle down. Have you seen any mines? Everyone sees mines. They come drifting past you, but so long as it's daylight, you can dodge 'em." One of the great dangers of fishing in wartime is the submerged mine that becomes caught in the trawler net, or the trawl net. When that happens, it's all up to you. My informant had never been machine-gunned, but his trawler had had the very trip... My informant had never been machine-gunned, but his trawler had that very trip been subjected to the scrutiny of a German aeroplane but his trawler had that very his trawler had that very trip been subjected to the scrutiny of a German aeroplane which dived out of low cloud and circled the ship almost over the smokestack, so that you feel the rush of air as he went past and almost deafened us with his engines? When do you go off again? I asked. On tonight's tide, he said. If I told him that he was a hero, he would have returned the compliment with withering contempt. That's book talk, that is. He was born and bred a fisherman, and he'll fish until something stops him, whether it's a storm at sea or a German mine. It doesn't matter which, for the result is the same, and anyhow, such things are written in the stars. Such is the armour of philosophy which all men in dangerous occupations assume the need. It was the philosophy of the front line in the last war. If your name was on a shell, well, you were for it. If not, you were one of the lucky ones. No industry in this country has been disorganised by war as that of fishing, yet the complaints about the lack of money and the hard conditions could almost be counted on the fingers of one hand. The port I was visiting is fortunate in the possession of a large number of trawlers, not quite up to the Admiralty standards, which means that fishing still goes on there. A neighbouring port, famous for its fine modern fleet, is almost silent, for the ships have been taken over by the Navy. This has caused considerable hardship and unemployment, because the Navy doesn't always commandeer crew with the ship. I saw the process of converting a fishing boat into an armed minesweeper, and was surprised by the amount of reconstruction involved. The whole ship has to be strengthened to take the guns. The fish holds are gutted and turned into sleeping quarters for the crew. Places where boxes of ice fish formerly reposed are full of ammunition, and a neat wireless cabin is tucked away also below deck. Commentating on the skill necessary for such a task, I was told that the workmen at present on the job were men who had converted trawlers in the last war. They had taken jobs during the Depression whenever they could get them, and one odd result of the war has been the discovery of skilled ship fitters in sweet and tobacco shops. Such men have been called back to work and have gladly responded. If you wish to hear about the war at sea, go to one of the public houses patronised by the trawler skippers. Every time the fleet comes in, the skippers go home and have a wash and a shave and put on their best suits and collars and ties and walk down to the King's Arms. They sit in a cloud of tobacco smoke, tankards of ale at their elbows, and discuss financial and other aspects of their latest outing. Nearly everything they say would be deleted by the censor, for the North Sea in wartime is as full of secrets as a net is sometimes full of fish. What impressed me about such men is that war to them is merely a risky kind of game, with rules which you break at your peril. If you do break them and get away with it, there are bursts of loud laughter in the King's Arms when the boys get together. If not, your health is drunk in a momentary silence, and somebody remembers that you always were a bit rash and a careless old basket. There are certainly men so wedded to their craft that by no effort of mind could they be imagined in any other. They say of a born fisherman that if you threw him into a canal, he would come up with a trawl round his neck. Such men could never be kept from the sea by fear of death. So next time you buy a fish, remember that some brave man, who would never admit it, risked his life to catch it. Well, I don't buy fish, so that won't be me. Anyway, that's the end of that. Chapter 10 is coming. Chapter 10. My journey ends with some reflection on travel in England during the Great Inertia. Then comes 1940, Dunkirk, and reality. and we have about 6, 7, 8 pages. I think we might finish that in one hit if we're lucky. So yeah, sorry about the slight fading in and out of consciousness in today's show. I do feel like I'm swimming through a slight mist, but anyway. Sounded like Fraser in Dad's Army. Yes, that's who I was modelling it on, really. My granddad said that the worst thing of his nerve were dolphins at night. Look just like torpedoes just below the surface. Oh, God, can you imagine that? Ah! Oh, it's all right, it's a dolphin. Can you imagine the shock of seeing something like that whiz past? And just think for a split second, you know, and jumping and then relaxing and then seeing another one and thinking, oh, it's all right. Oh, God. I can't. I would be rubbish at war. Do you realise South York's police has a building off Let'sby Avenue in Sheffield as a joke? They think the police helicopter used to be based there at Sheffield. Is there really such a place as Let'sby Avenue? All right then, son. Let'sby Avenue. Hello. What's going on here then? Mines are such terrible blight on land and sea, says Ed Loud. Made me sad to see beautiful fields fenced off with danger mine signs during a trip. We were lucky in England not to have such blights. Yeah, absolutely. Ben Reeve carries on. All the time he had to leapfrog a lightning bolt that hit his ship and apparently bounced along the deck. Good God. You'll finish it, I'm sure. Have you thought of another book yet? No, I was just wondering if anyone's got any suggestions for another book. Or would you like me to stop? I'll have to start thinking of another interesting book that's got a broad enough subject to appeal and is not too localised. I've got one book which I think everybody will enjoy here. There's a couple, but this one here I think could be very good. And there is one here. Not that one. The one I want ain't here. The one that I want, whap, whap, whap. This is almost as good. Almost as highly entertaining. The first one I think you'll find is absolutely riveting and a great read that everybody, you know, a broad amount of people would be able to get. And that is this very light bit of light reading, this one, that you'll all enjoy here. Farming technique from prehistoric to modern times in incredibly long-winded detail in everything you could possibly want to know, which goes into huge detail, which I thought, you know, you might be interested in. This is very fascinating. Some of the textbooks written during the 17th century deal only with one branch of farming, e.g. Maskell on cattle, Markham on various subjects, Vaughan on waterworks, Butler on bees. Others are general treatises, Blythe and... Yeah, you can see how exciting that one is. Or there's this one, which I'm sure you'll find really exciting, which published in 1948. You'll like this one very much. Church life in England in the 13th century. Whereas you get such wonderful expressions such as the occasional officers are the point where the parish priest's pastoral and devotional work are brought most closely together. concerned as many of them are with the great events of family life, birth, marriage, sickness, and death, they provide an opportunity for the work and workmanship of the church to impinge upon the intimacies of the home. In the 13th century, the parish priest was more closely associated with his people than the modern clergyman can ever hope to be. In a community of some 60 or 70 households living closely together and almost completely cut off from the sights and sounds of the outside world, the parson would find himself working side by side with his people in the open fields, and would meet them from time to time at the common mill or the village well, and would face day by day with them the dangers and disasters which so constantly threatened their security and their lives. Actually, that bit was quite interesting. That bit was actually quite interesting. I do find these old books, even though they're dry as a bone, and you sometimes need to pour metaphysical water into them, I do find them quite interesting, but you certainly wouldn't want to read them out loud. The Decline of an English Village, says Linda Kane. Yes, the Decline of an English Village would be hilarious, but it's too modern, and I would get done for that. I couldn't read that. I would love to. The only thing I'm thinking is that I don't necessarily have to read the whole book. I could just read elements of a book. I think we need more Philip Mercer, says Ed Loud. Yes, Philip Mercer would be good. They are rather diverse. Yes. Good afternoon, Welsh Wanderer. Good afternoon to you. What about something uplifting like Three Men in a Boat, says yes, Three Men in a Boat. I did have a copy of Three Men in a Boat. Not in here. I don't. I wonder where that. I wonder where my Three Men in Jerome K. Jerome. Yeah, I was thinking of reenacting that. Also, I'm thinking of opening a different YouTube channel for the book readings. I've got a defunct. I have an already existent defunct channel, which I thought I could do it from. I would tell everybody the address. Of course, there's a. Another exciting book that you may wish me to read is, of course, this great classic, Packman Carriers and Pack Horse Roads by David Hay. Equally, if you want something a little light reading here, the point of wheeled vehicles, though no doubt of a primitive kind, were in common use in this region before the 18th century, is worth labouring, for it is widely believed that the highland parts of Britain were limited to pack-horse traffic. The fine medieval bridges over the Derwent, Don and Wye are sufficient in themselves to refute this view and to show that loads much wider than those carried by pack-horses were brought regularly across the rivers. Put that in your pipe and smoke it. Yeah, well, we'll have a look. Please don't spread yourself too thinly. Yes, don't worry. I'm not jam. Sir Henry at Rawlinson End says, what is that? Is that the Book of Codswallop by Peter Fish? That sounds good. Is that a real book? Yes, 3 minutes. Would you get done? He writes really well. The Book of Codswallop. Is that what? Would you get done? Well, it's copyright. Are you talking about the Decline of an English? That would be lovely. I would love to read that, but they're trying to sell it. Please, I read that. PC buildings for the common man. Yes, that's true. Still enjoy your walks of Sussex. Oh, thank you very much. The bit about Waterloo Station in that book is still true, says Graham Roffey. Oh, what, in Three Men in a Boat? Yeah, we need to think of something. We need to think of something. I'll have a look. I'll have a rummage on my shelves. Try and find something which is, again, it's got to be a classic that is out of print, really. I think that's the thing. But it can't be too much of a classic that nobody, like, what's his name? That somebody suggested. I haven't died. Oh, what's his name? What's his name? Great big tome. The Travels of England and Wales and Everywhere, whatever it's called, by Daniel Defoe. It's too old hat. The Thames to the Solent by J.B. Dashwood, 1868. Yeah, that sounds good. But Richard Jefferies, or one of his countryside books. Yes. Funny enough, I was reading a bit of W.H. What's his name? W.H. Smith. No, not W.H. Smith. W.H. Hudson. Is it Hudson? With a shepherd. I've got them in the other room. I've got a couple of his countryside books. They're quite nice. I've got some Peter and Jane books. We might get through some of those quite quickly. Noddy and Toyland. Yeah, we'll have to think. We've got the weekend to think because Monday's the next time. So anyway, Monday at 4:00. We'll hopefully get the last chapter of that. I'll have a think, put some ideas out, feelers out, see what people think, and I may move the live stream to a different channel so it's it separates the walks, the Board Explorer stuff from the readings. Because if people like me doing the readings, I'll carry on doing the readings. I know some days I'm better at it than others. But yeah, if you've got some suggestions, that were good. Well, not out of print, but out of copyright, says my favourite classic out of print I can think of is Dr. Sin. Yes, you see, I think we're on safer ground. Well, if it's out of copyright, that's great. But these aren't out of copyright technically, but they're probably not in print, and so probably, they're not that bothered too much. I wouldn't have thought. They might be, but why would they? Because I doubt they're going to re-release these ever again, and they'll just be available as second hand. I can't imagine. So if that's the situation, but if it's a classic that's likely to be printed and there's still copyright on it, then obviously I think that's a no-no. But the ones that we've done, apart from Narrow Boat, which might get printed from time to time, LTC Rolt's one, I can't imagine J.B. Priestley's English Journey, whatever it was, would be done again. Yeah, so that's that then, really. Please keep up the reading. Thank you very much. The Project Gutenberg, Lazy Thoughts of a Lazy Girl. I don't know that one at all. Yeah, well, I'm up for... I think it would need to be something to do with England. I suppose it doesn't have to be if I'm moving it from the Board Explorer, but having it something to do with England, as all of these have been, and potentially touring, like Jerome K. Jerome's one would be good. Harold the Last Saxon. Yes, I was going to say you are keeping Narrow Boat safe for you. Narrow Boat is where did I put it? I put it in a safe place. I hope I didn't put it in the Essie. It's got a nice cover on it, hasn't it? And it's what have I done with it? Yes, this isn't it. It's in the other room. I remember now. I put it in a safe place on my shelf, which is where I can't find it in the other room. This is what's his name? W.H. Hudson. That's it. Nature in Downland and Old Thorn, the open air library. This is a bit of shepherd on the downs. That solitary cloaked figure on the vast round hill, standing motionless, crook in hand and rough-haired dog at heel, sharply seen against the pale sky, is one of those rare human forms in this land which do not ever seem out of place in the landscape. It is undoubtedly a form to attract and fascinate the eye, but behind the seeing eyes are the differing, busy minds. There are those, for instance, who are solely interested in the image, the semblance, who are not like the fox in the fable, concerned as what to... Anyway, it's a bit heavy, though. It's, well, not heavy, but it's a bit fancy. It's a bit twee, isn't it? You know, I think that they're not really... It's not broad enough for... anyway, whatever. Keep on reading about England. Yes, that's my thing. All the book in that voice. Yeah, no, couldn't do it. No. Don't panic. Don't worry. I have another copy if I lose it, but I've got it. So I've got another copy. But I have got it. I mean, I don't lend them out, and I don't do anything silly with them. I don't put them on the fireplace, you know. I'll have a look. There's lots of interesting books I've got. So and I'm sure we'll get some. I've ordered some books recently. I can't remember what I've got coming soon. One was out of print and they've had to refund me, which was a shame, which is a bit of a tome. But anyway, I better go. Thanks very much. I'm going to go and get the SE lit now and sort out some dinner before the Vogue show, and also try and think what I'm going to do walking-wise for tomorrow. I have a video tomorrow, a bit of an odd video, actually. I did it this morning because I didn't go out because I had to go down to the bank, and I had to go and get some letters sent out, and I've had to move my logs because I'm picking up a tree tomorrow. It's the smallest tree, and I don't really know what to make of it. Really, I'm always I feel guilty if I haven't done a walk video and I've done something at home, and it's just me at home talking to the camera. I feel very guilty about those. What book's that over there? Keep looking at my books now to see which one would be good. All right, thank you very much. Take care. Have a lovely time. And I like odd videos. Yeah, well, it's not odd in that way. It's just, if the book is set in Sussex, it'll be read in completely different dialect. Well, I can't do a Sussex. Funnily enough, I can't do a Sussex accent. So, you know, rural accent, it becomes a bit like that because it's sort of standard practice with me now. That's rural, even though it might be, you know, down west and whatever. It's just sort of like that is my my country bumpkins accent for anywhere that's not in an urban environment. So you could be talking like this in Northumberland, really, or down there in Wiltshire or Somerset or wherever, because they all get the same treatment, because I'm not very good with that accents regionally. You just get comedy accent of Farmer Piles. Hello there, I'm Farmer Piles, I is. Anyway, enough of this. I will catch you later or whenever. Thank you very much. I must go. I'm embarrassing myself. Take care and toodle pip. Toodle pip, old chap. Toodle pip. And I hope, Jeff, you managed to sort your tyre out. Jeff earlier had a flat tyre, so I hope you managed to sort it all out. Anyway, take care and bye-bye for now.